Of the world. It is the Sunday Spark from the Ayn Rand Center UK. I'm Jonathan Honig from capitalistpig.com. More than delighted that you're joining us from all around the world to talk to our guest today, Mr. Jim Brown. Sunday Spark, brand new here on the channel. This is where we sit down with some of the biggest names in objectivism, in the objectivist movement, talk about their projects, talk about how they're applying the philosophy to their lives, how it's bettering their lives, and just a bit about some of these extraordinary characters that when you start to learn about objectivism, you have the honor and the pleasure of meeting. Jim Brown is our guest today. Jim is I believe, retired from the investment manager business, but a former investment manager, very successful. He was an ARI, that's the Ayn Rand Institute board member for many, many years, helped shepherding that organization to great success, and the author of a new book. We'll make sure you put the link in the chat there, called A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. So we're going to talk some economics, talk some philosophy, maybe even some politics. And Jim, you're also going to be speaking at the upcoming Irreplaceable Spark Conference at the end of the month through the Ayn Rand Center UK.
That's right. Yep. I'm looking forward to that.
Really?
And you are too, right? Of course you are.
Yeah. For a lot of people, standing up and giving public speeches is very difficult. People routinely listed as their number one fear. Did you have to do that a lot in the investment world, kind of stand up and present ideas? Or, is it comfortable for you? How are you preparing for the conference?
Oh, well, I remember many years ago, I would get very nervous standing up in front of people. And finally, I realized that, no one cares. They just want, they're not going to take away your ums and ahs and your little mistakes. If you get up in front of them and shake like a leaf, they'll remember that. But they're going to remember, if they remember anything, it's one or two or three things that you say. So I learned to be confident and speak my mind. I think that comes also, you have to really think about what is on your mind. You have to really think, what are your ideas, and try to make them clear. But once, I don't know, after a while, there's another thing too, John. After you get old enough, you just don't give a damn. What's the worst that could happen if you bomb a speech? Who cares, right?
Well, there's an efficacy to your ideas, and just thinking about this notion of Rand's razor and how efficient Miss Rand was with her words. How when you read a book of Ayn Rand's, you don't feel that fatigue, the reading fatigue. When you were writing A Black Hole in Economics, well, let me ask you this. How do you want people to act differently after having read your book? Because, for a lot of people, they say money creation, what does it have to do to me? I'm a 30 or 40-year-old, I'm doing my own. How do you want them to act differently having read the book?
Oh, I totally agree, Jonathan. This is not a topic that I set out to write this book, and I was thinking, there are just not people lying awake at night thinking, oh, I wish someone would write a book on money creation and its consequences, waiting for this thing to show up. Honestly, people just don't think about it. I realized a number of years ago that obviously money moves markets, and I've been an investment professional for years. I was a bank analyst and a bank analyst running a research group that did almost nothing but analyze banks, insurance companies, and other financial institutions for the purpose of evaluating them for investment for, publicly traded firms. Well, I realized after I retired, I never really understood how banks created money. I knew somehow that the money creation process resided in the banking system, but I really never understood. And not only that, but there was a wide disparity of explanations. And as I got into it and really did my own work, deep work, I found that most people have the wrong idea. They've swallowed a false idea. Well, that in itself didn't matter, but my worry is, my concern is that has consequences for people's fortunes. It has consequence for wealth. It has consequence for them understanding the mess we are in with our monetary system. And if people, whoops,
You're fine.
Is that my bell? Stop.
No.
So to cut to the chase, you asked me how I want people to change. I want them to understand that money creation, especially irresponsible, I would say, or unproductive money creation, which is always done at the hand of some government agency, some government policy. I want them to understand that has profound consequences for their wealth management, for their, if you have made wealth and you want to keep it, I think you need to pay attention to this topic. If you want to accumulate wealth in the environment that we are approaching, which I think is a pretty significant change in the monetary system that the entire world operates on, especially the international system. If you want to accumulate wealth, if you're a young person, you want to accumulate wealth in that environment that we're now in, I think you need to understand this. See, most people don't understand the environment they're in. They're still operating on the environment of yesterday and before that. This is my belief.
There is talk that, given the macroeconomic influences now, that we could be headed. And I know this could be, just the kind of the bearishness, but in for a period not unlike the 70s, the really volatile 70s when it comes to something, especially like inflation. I mean, this is something, Jim, I know I hear on the radio from listeners and people on online, Twitter and stuff, and they say, I know it's come down, but it's still really impacting my family. And even, for me, I even think, gee, like $1,000 to me used to be a hell of a lot of money. It's not just that I have more necessarily now, but $1,000 doesn't get you anywhere what it used to just a couple of years ago. It's like the Uber from LaGuardia into Manhattan now is $100. I mean, that was 45. So inflation seems to be like something that is continuing, and no one has any idea of even why we have it in the first place.
Well, I completely agree, and not only that, but I think the consumer price index and the various indices that the Bureau of Labor Statistics and so forth puts out for us to use as a gauge for our cost of living, I think it's very clear. Those understate badly the actual effect of inflation. I mean, you just mentioned some things that you live with. A doubling of your Uber ride. Now that's probably fairly important to you, but that doesn't show, I guarantee you that statistic doesn't show up in the consumer price index. And there are many, many other things. And I could get into the nits and noits of it, but I'm not going to do that here. But the point is, I don't even think it's right to think of inflation as increases in consumer prices, which is what most people call it. I think because increases in consumer prices are only one symptom of what inflation really is. Inflation is an increase in the quantity of money caused by the government. And what another translation is, it's unproductive money creation that does not result in products and services that we can use. And so if you take that definition, you can pretty quickly see that other consequences of inflation, in addition to prices, are malinvestment, wasted capital, an increasing and unjust bifurcation or difference in the wealth distribution in this country. I mean, wealthy people with assets benefit from asset inflation. Mm-hmm. People with no assets get left behind. And if government encourages money creation, and that money creation goes into the asset markets, you and I benefit because we manage assets. You and I benefit because we have assets. People who have savings and are in the right assets, yeah, they can benefit. But the guy who has just a cash salary, he's having a hard time getting ahead. He's having a real hard time. So that. that's just one. That is just one of the many unjust outcomes of government-sponsored money creation.
Bonnie is a member. She's a YouTube member. Bonnie writes, Jim has original and valuable things to say about money creation, but the value of his talk for me is getting to enjoy a rational person in real life. Isn't that true, Jim? It's like I don't know if you felt like
Oh,
this.
thanks, Bonnie. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Rand called objectivism a philosophy for living on Earth. And I have to imagine that you have found, as you've applied Miss Rand's ideas to your life over the years, that it's made your life better, whether it be in business, whether it be in personal relationships. It's really improved your life. Where would you be without it?
It's totally true. I mean, it's gotten to be a little bit of a cliche, but so objective ethics, objectivist ethics, and objective ethics, probably the same thing. Um, to me, it's been and learning to monitor my own mind to learn to think more clearly, using the principles and the tips that you get from Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff. It's sort of been my secret weapon, and I feel, and it's if I have one, and I just feel that I would not have developed the confidence and the certainty to uh, to believe that I can achieve a rational goal and that I can arrive at knowledge that I can be confident in without her epistemology and her importantly her novels, because they put it all into concrete aspirational form. And the first Rand novel I read was The Fountainhead, and everyone has practically everyone alive who has taken Ayn Rand seriously has had this experience or something like it. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I couldn't put it down. I didn't sleep. I was 19. Um, I still remember it as uh, such a transformative experience. I had just recently given up God, and I was kind
Hmm.
of maybe floating a little bit. I was in my second year at the Air Force Academy, and I read it one summer when I had some pretty light summer duty, and I didn't sleep.
You thank you for your service too. Truly, I don't know.
Oh
Were you drafted?
no, that was
No.
no. I was no, I no, I got an appointment to the Air Force Academy, and I was completely gung ho for the military. I was definitely a volunteer.
That's what, and we will talk about this. This is part of what you're going to be talking about at the conference as well. Is I remember at one point Dr. Peikoff talking about a Renaissance man and what it meant to be a Renaissance man. And in many ways, you are a Renaissance man. You've had so many different interests and careers and paths that you've taken, seemingly all of them successfully. I mean, you were a commercial airline pilot for years, as I understand it, before
Well,
even investments.
not actually for years. So the sequence was I went to the Air Force Academy, then pilot training, and then I was an Air Force pilot, and then I left the Air Force and went to graduate school, went to Harvard Business School, and
Did you
coming out of
did you
there,
did you see military action, if you will?
I missed it. I uh, my pilot training class graduated in August of 1972,
Mm.
and then of course there was training after that. But that was right when the the air war was winding down rapidly. So the class before me was pipeline to Vietnam, and my class of 45, 46, we had one guy get
Mm.
an assignment to Vietnam. Everybody else got kind of scattered into, and then of course, not long after that, everything slowed down, and flying time became very scarce, and so on and so forth. which is one of the reasons I left after 5 years, and I went to graduate school. And I know this sounds really rapid fire, but I did a project while I was at graduate school, a consulting. I was in the Air Force Reserve and flew in graduate school, but I did a project for a professor who had a connection with a Southern regional airline, Southern Airways, it was called. And so they liked my work, and they asked me to come to work. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? I said, well, I'd like you to be the assistant to the chief of flight operations. And I said, well, okay, I'll come if I can fly. I said, okay. So I had this dual job. I was in the management side and I was flying the line. It wasn't 6 or 8 months into that job that the airline got absorbed. That was in the late 70s, and it was there was big consolidation in the airlines going on. So my middle management job got afuera, and then about that time I was frankly a little bit bored with airline flying. It was kind of like it had its moments, but it's kind of like being a high-tech bus driver. And I was thinking, geez, I can't do this for 30 years. And about that time, the Air Force called me up. And they said, hey, would you come back in? And I said, well, what do you got? So they gave a really interesting offer. So I went back in for a while. So that's like the first portion
before
for me of my life.
Before you had mentioned a little bit like, boy, I get to fly. I was seeing kind of that, is that people who love to fly planes. I mean, I see Blake Scholl, who I know you know. Blake's enthusiasm.
Yeah. Love Blake.
Yeah, I mean, another amazing, objectivist. Well, at one point we'll sit down, we'll talk with him. But like, do you ever miss flying? Do you ever, would you miss flying? Because it's something about flying that, as safe as it is, it's almost like, what is Rand's line? Nature to be commanded must be obeyed. You're flying that plane and you have to be respectful of the wind front and thunderstorms. And I mean, you have to act in accordance with nature. Otherwise, that plane is not going to be flying for too long.
Yeah, it's true. And do I miss it? Well, I used to be a decent baseball player, but I can't play baseball anymore. I mean, after a while, you peak. It was getting rapidly to the point where my flying days were going to be highly limited, and I was going to go off to staff jobs, and I found that rather unappealing. So that's when I finally cut my Air Force career short, because the flying was diminishing. But there's more than that. I mean, you mentioned Renaissance man. I've never considered myself a Renaissance man, but what I have had ever since I can remember, John, I'm just interested in everything, and it's kind of a curse. I grew up loving athletics, and I played lots of sports, and I was in rock and roll bands, and I mean, I loved music, and I loved student organizations, and I was a good student, and all these things, and I was just busy as hell and just trying to do everything at once. And I just found you can't do that forever. And my interests didn't narrow, but they sort of focused. And I'd always had this interest in economics. I'd always had this interest in especially how the stock market works. I think that was really cool. And so I thought when my Air Force career was winding down, I said, well, that's the direction I'm going to go. And that's when I made the transition to being a stockbroker.
Your interest in pursuing values is inspiring. I mean, the fact that you would sit down and work on a project like a black hole in economics, challenging, in effect, from what I'm understanding, challenging the work that you had done successfully for probably 20 some odd years prior. And, I remember at one point, Dr. Peikoff distinguishing between having an open mind and having an active mind. I believe that's true in one of his podcasts. But, you having not closed yourself off to new information, new integrations, and having the, I guess, stamina to sit down and write a book. There's a lot of people who tell you, "Oh, I'm working on a book. I have a book idea," but to sit down and work on something of this magnitude, that's a tremendous commitment.
It is. It's like I imagine it must be like having a baby, except it takes longer. It's just you think you map it out and you think, oh, I can do this part of it in a few months. A few months later, you've discovered you realized all the thinking errors you've made to get there, and you have to backtrack and start again. These kinds of things, but I having it's interesting. You mentioned sort of challenged my old knowledge. That is definitely true, and that's really motivated me when I realized that the things that we had been doing at my firm, they didn't result in bad disasters necessarily, but when I realized that the things we did were based on incorrect knowledge, things that
Mm-hmm.
we thought were true that are absolutely not true about the banking and monetary system. I thought, oh, I I owe my brain better than this. I have got to, I've got to get in here and discover uh, how this really works.
Well, I want to ask a few questions about kind of modern day economics. So, I mean, people are worried about their money. They're finding that it's worth a little bit less. You're talking about money creation. I believe the debt ceiling now has been raised. Seems like there's a lot of debt being created, and a lot of both for consumers and for governments. Is this economy in for a rocky ride now? I know this isn't financial advice, but do you think that we're in a bit of a black hole?
So yes, the unpayable, and I call it avowedly unpayable sovereign debt of this country and most Western countries is to call it an Achilles heel is understating the problem. It is the driving problem, in my view, of the change going on in the monetary system today. We literally cannot make good on our promises, on the promises that government has made to people. It's not just the $37 trillion in debt, 37 point whatever it is now. It's all the forward obligations of medical care, cradle to grave medical care, Social Security that's unfunded into the future. And
Right.
in the book I try to do I try to sort of estimate a present value uh, uh, a present value of that using some pretty simple techniques. But I
But
mean,
this,
it's at least $100 trillion. It's not payable. There's not the entire balance sheet of all the world is not big enough to fund this debt. And no one, and look at Congress. They neither side will address this issue. They are incentivized not to. All they need to do is fund themselves until the next election. That's their incentive. And it's a real problem. And I see no stopping this train. And I wish I did. I wish I could see my way out. But the medicine that the country would have to take is so bitter that the population will not stand for it. It will not. And so, and at least not at this point. There's got to be. I mean, there would have to be some kind of a sweeping tide of rational thinking to
Mhm.
to wave over our legislators and our population. So because of that, inflation to what I call inflation, unproductive money creation, that will pay down this debt in cheaper dollars. That's essentially what they have to do. That is really the only alternative available to our government if we're going to hold society together. And it has to be gradual and it has to be painful. And the way for us to beat it is to stay ahead of what they're doing. And
Mhm.
that is why I've been advocating, and I think you have too, I've been advocating precious metals investing in gold and silver, and trying to stay ahead of the inflation curve. And this is actually not just a simple argument. It's a rather nuanced, complex argument. And I talk about it all the time. I just finished another podcast yesterday. It's at my producers, my editors. It'll be out in a few days. But, we've had I'll just say this for people who care. We've had a big run up in the price of gold and the price of silver. And the question is it over? Or did you miss the train? Is it too late to hop on? The answer is no, it's not too late, but I'll let people, make their own judgments on that.
Yeah, definitely. Our viewers want to do their own, you want to know why you invest. You don't want to invest in something because, this expert told me this idea. You have to understand it and believe it. I think that's why the book is really great, A Black Hole in Economics, Money Creation and Its Consequences. It sounds very dense, but this is something that even econ experts can get into. Ms. Rand's
Jonathan,
book,
thank you. If I may say thank you for saying that, because I took great pains in writing this book to try to make it understandable. Because the worst thing to me about experts, so-called experts, is that they write in ways that people just can't understand. Yeah. And I wanted to make this understandable to anyone with a reasonable education and with interest. And so, but you don't have to be a financial expert or have financial training to understand this book. And at least that was my goal in writing this.
I bet that one of Miss Rand's collections of works, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, my bet is that's one of your favorites, as it is one of mine. And I always just go back and think about the subtitle of how unknown it really is, and how so much of what is blamed on capitalism is specifically not capitalism. And you've kind of seen cultural trends over a number of decades now. I mean, do you think, to me, free market capitalism seems about on the same level as where Lyndon LaRoucheism used to be in 10 years ago. We are
Jonathan, wait a minute. Nobody that you and I know who that guy is, but go ahead.
I mean, when you say I advocate for laissez-faire free market capitalism, people are kind of like, oh, well, this guy's obviously on mushrooms. That everyone knows that's crazy. Yeah. So, as Miss Rand said, it's still the unknown ideal. Unknown. And that's got to
be. It's the unknown ideal, and let me add, it's the unknown ideal, but it can't be quashed. It cannot be, because capitalism is an extension of people's desire to make their lives better, to produce and to earn. You cannot. It doesn't matter how many regulations or how oppressive a government gets. Yes. That spirit will live on. And I'm always amazed how resilient economies are, despite the worst things government do to them. I mean, they really are resilient.
Don't you agree? I don't want to be as skinny as people in non-capitalist countries.
Right.
The North Koreans are way too skinny. I need to be a lot better fed than the.
Of course.
I'm always in awe of man, certainly man as an animal, and what he is able to create and achieve. But government, as you're alluding to, you're writing about in the book, has so much to do with our ability to live our lives, achieve those values, pursue those values. So this is a conversation that's not going away. And in fact, part of what you're going to be doing at the conference is a mentoring. So if you come and join us in California at the end of the month, you'll be able to sit down with Jim and speak with him one-on-one on this, and get your book signed on this and any other topics. So,
well, one thing people, I think, who are, as I am, dedicated to a capitalist ideal, the one thing you can't do is lose heart and it's easy to do. It's easy to just get consumed by all that stuff that goes on around us. I can't. How can I function? Well, Blake Scholl doesn't do that. He's saying, I'm going to build a supersonic airplane, and I'm going to do it despite all odds, and I think he's going to succeed. And I think you have to conduct your life that way and understand that, you can find the inspiration and the good no matter, well, okay, let's just put it this way, John. Nuclear war is not investable, okay? Nuclear war is the ultimate disaster, would change everything. But I really think almost short of that, there's always opportunity and always hope and always a chance for you to think your way through and prosper. And just so I would never, if I'm offering off the cuff advice now, never get discouraged. There's always a way.
I think that's outstanding, and pursue your dreams. Dr. Peikoff's going to be at the conference. I believe talking about music, or one of his loves, and passion for literature, and passion for ideas. And so there's so much optimism in that message, and I appreciate it, and I know our audience does as well. So before the end of the month, go pick up a copy of Jim's new book, A Black Hole in Economics: Money Creation and Its Consequences. And you will be participating, as I will, in the Irreplaceable Spark Conference end of this month in Northern California, San Diego, California. So please come and join us. And Jim, thank you for joining me for the Sunday Spark. What a great opportunity to be able to sit down with you and chat. I mean, we could do this for 3 more hours, but we'll table it till the end of this month.
Jonathan, it's always good talking to you. You're a great professional and a great interviewer, and thanks. And I'll see you in, I guess, a few weeks.
Looking forward to it, and thanks to our audience for joining us. Share, like, donate, become part of what we're doing. We're here 7 days a week with original content that's inspired by ideas, inspired by the only thing that can change the world, good ideas, and Miss Rand's ideas in particular. So wishing you best premises, and be well.
Cheers.